Hi BookTube, it's Gina, and I wanted to talk to you today about some of my favorite genres. So I did the BookTube newbie tag when I first started my channel a few months ago, and I loved it. I had so much fun doing it, and I can't remember where I grabbed the questions for that, but I realized as I was watching other BookTube newbie tags that one of the questions that I would love to answer was not on the tag that I had seen. So I wanted to do a little catch up today and talk to you about my favorite genres, which was a question on the BookTube newbie tag that for some reason I didn't see it or I missed it. And so I never really talked to you about the types of books that I love the most, what genres I read, and why I read them. And so I thought I would check in today and talk about that. Now, these are my favorite genres. I read a lot more than this, and I realize when I look at my stacks, I've got a few piles of books here, that I generally do tend to read a lot of women authors, and that's just something I gravitate towards, I think, naturally. I've never really made a conscious effort to read more female authors, but that seems to be where I've landed. So my 6 piles of books here that I've got that I'm going to talk about are mysteries, fantasies, modern classics, and by classics I mean like Jane Austen era classics, not classical like Ovid. I call this next genre the cozy ladies, and then lastly the intellectual ladies. So let's get started. My first favorite genre is mysteries, and I grabbed a pile of some of my favorite mysteries here to share with you. I like intellectual mysteries like the Elizabeth George type of mystery that is a really literary mystery, but I also love the cozy mysteries. So, for instance, this is The Cat Who Wasn't There by Lillian Jackson Braun, and these are mysteries in which the cats, Coco and Yum Yum, feature quite heavily. These were written in the, I think, late 80s, 90s, maybe even a smidge earlier. She wrote throughout a fairly long time period. They're quite dated now, but the very first one of these I read was The Cat Who Knew Shakespeare, and it was set in, this man's beautiful home library, and of course I just fell in love with that. So I went back and reread the whole series. I've reread this a couple times. It's very cozy. If you like cats, you will love this series. I also love these sort of I'm just going to call this the old lady mystery. This is Dorothy Gilman, Mrs. Polyfax, and the Hong Kong Buddha. So Mrs. Polyfax is a wonderful character who's, I picture her as a little old lady, but when I read this, I kind of think she may be in her 50s, early 60s. So she very well could be my age. I'm 53, but she is a lady that is recruited by the CIA to be a spy, and these are really, really fun. And then, of course, I've got to pop an Agatha Christie on here. Look at this old Dell paperback. I think this is wonderful. And then lastly, I've got P.D. James, The Murder Room, and I think P.D. James is one of those more literary mystery writers. And then Ian Pears. This is Death and Restoration, and Ian Pears wrote The Instance of the Finger Post and Arcadia. He's written quite a few books that I love, but he had this mystery series back in the early 90s, and the protagonist is Jonathan Argyle, and he solves what I call the art history mysteries. And these are fantastic. I'm on a reread of these because they're so good. And then also, I don't have a copy of this one because it's I've read them on Kindle, but the C.J. Sansom mysteries that feature Matthew Shardlake in the Tudor era. He is sort of connected to King Henry and the Cardinal and Thomas Cromwell. And that's a really, really fun series too. All right, so that is my mystery genre, which I absolutely love. Then my next favorite is the fantasy, and I do love fantasies. I read The Lord of the Rings when I was a kid, and then I kind of dropped out of reading fantasies. I don't know why I did that. I just never really gave them that much more thought. And I realized a few years ago, someone had recommended this Mistborn trilogy. And this series really kicked off a whole new reading experience for me. I realized how wonderful this fantasy genre could be. I had just never really thought about it. It wasn't like I didn't want to read it because I didn't think it was going to be valid or good. It just never really was on my radar. So when I saw somebody talking about this, I just thought, that sounds wonderful. This first book is great. You could sort of read it alone and not continue with the trilogy. But the ending to this is not the real ending. More continues in books 2 and 3, which just blew my mind and were so interesting and so well written and just so thought provoking that I just absolutely loved it. So that led me to then Robin Hobb, which is, and may even have been recommended by the same person who recommended Mistborn. I don't remember now. But Robin Hobb, this is the one of her trilogies in the Realm of the Elderlings series, which is a series of 16 books. This is one of the trilogies, the Live Ship Traders trilogy. And this one I think is probably my favorite trilogy out of that whole series. Now the whole series is just fantastic. It's one of those things like a recipe where you put together 3 ingredients and you have this like thing to blow your mind. This series, some of the books had pieces in it I didn't love, but the overall experience of this as a whole was just sublime. It was absolutely wonderful. I read them fairly quickly one year in succession. It maybe took me a month or 6 weeks. I can't even remember. But this is so good. I love this whole series. And then lastly, in my fantasy genre is Guy Gavriel Kay. This is Tigana, one of my all-time favorite fantasy novels. Just a wonderful, broad, expansive tale of sort of the good versus evil, but in a land where magic has been sort of appropriated, and it's wonderful. My next favorite category that I read is the mid-century modern. These are, I call this sort of mid-century modern ladies because I do love the ladies, but I do have a cat here, one of the male authors in here. So this first one is Barbara Pym, who is one of my favorites. I've got a whole lot of her books. You can't see them from here, but a whole lot of these little paperbacks. And she writes about the sort of English village life. There are usually vicars and ladies and how that village interaction goes. And it's just a really fun, story about ladies. Oftentimes they are the, what would they call them? The shabby gentlewomen. They are maybe on the outs a little bit financially, but they are the excellent women, the ones who are excellent but are maybe a little financially strapped. And then D.E. Stevenson, this is the second in her Miss Bungle series. This is Miss Bungle Married, which is sort of a spoiler for book 1, which is Miss Bungle's book, but which is also a favorite. And then this is The Priory by Dorothy Whipple in this beautiful Persephone's classics. And Persephone publishers do some of these mid-century women who have been out of print or forgotten. Look at the end papers in this. Sorry. It also comes with a matching bookmark. So these are absolutely just gorgeous, and I love these sort of mid-century ladies. Then I've also got my favorite classics. So I do love classics. I've got an old copy of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Isn't that a fun little paperback edition? Sometimes I can't tell if these are abridged. I think this is an abridged copy because it's quite short and little. So I think this is an abridged copy. Also on here, I would count Middlemarch as one of my favorites by George Eliot. And then a non-lady, Anthony Trollope, who probably right now is my favorite classics author. Classic. He doesn't write classics. It's a classic. Anthony Trollope. This is the Eustace Diamonds. I haven't read this one yet. I just finished the Barchester series, which is the Warden, Dr. Thorne, Barchester Towers. And he's such a good writer, so funny, so engaging. So this is going to be my next series by him. This is the Palliser series. This is not the first one, so I won't be starting with this, but I've got the other one on my Kindle. And then I've got my cozy ladies, and these are probably my two favorite authors of all time. When I want something cozy, this is what I go to. This is Rosamund Pilcher. This is her family saga, September, which is set in a village, and it goes through the year. Starts out in May. I almost always reread this in September, but it starts in May, so I actually could reread it now and still sort of count it. But it's just, Rosamund Pilcher writes so beautifully. I have to share this passage with you, talking about Violet Aird, who is the old lady sort of matriarch, but in a very fun kind of artsy gardener family way. And so they're describing her day. So every morning of her life, rain or shine, Violet Aird walked to the village to collect from Mrs. Eshak's supermarket 2 pints of milk, the Times, and any other small groceries and supplies needed for the sustenance of one elderly lady living on her own. Isn't that fantastic? Only sometimes, in the depths of winter, when the snow piled in deep drifts and the ice became treacherous, did she eschew this exercise on the principle that discretion was the better part of valor. Lots of descriptions of the scenery. I realize one of the things I really love about these books is I love reading for setting. I love very, very vivid settings. They talk about the domestic setting. They talk about the food that they're making and eating and their tea. And I absolutely love that. And then, of course, my beloved Miss Reed, who wrote a lot of books. This is one from her Thrush Green series, which is a very cozy, old-fashioned, also, this is somewhat dated, but just very sweet. This is about the fair that comes to town. This is the caravan that the leader of the fair brings into town. She lives in it, and I think the caravan at this point has passed on to someone else, but isn't that just a beautiful cover? So I love Miss Reed. I just love the cozy books that I can just settle into and relax, reading, and it's just very, very, I find it very calming when I need just something that I want to read and zone out on. And then lastly, I have my category that I call the intellectual ladies, and these are more literary. They're wonderful. I absolutely love these. I've talked about Iris Murdoch before, but this is The Sea, and she won I think it was the Booker Prize for this. I don't remember now. I didn't do any research, sorry. This is, look at that beautiful cover. Isn't that beautiful? Iris Murdoch, I find, is also getting a little bit dated now. When she was writing in the 70s, I think a lot of her books focus on on like Freudian therapy that just like a lot of the characters are going through analysis, and it feels like that type of analysis and therapy has sort of morphed today. And so whenever I read that, it just seems a little bit just a little bit out of place for me as a current modern reader. But she's a wonderful intellectual, very fun to read author. And then similarly to her, I think is A.S. Byatt. I found this beautiful copy of Still Life that had her Antonia Byatt name on it, which I thought was really interesting because she, after this, went by A.S. on all of her books. And she's also a very literary storyteller, wonderful. This is a quartet. And I think maybe even there's a few books later that have been written more recently that still involve some of the same characters. That's wonderful. And then my most recent intellectual lady is The Essex Serpent, Sarah Perry. This book I absolutely loved. I just fell in love with it. Again, the setting was so richly described, and that cover, I just fell in love with that cover. So that was sort of an overview, a very fast overview, but I wanted to sort of share with you the types of books that I really passionately love, and sort of just the general direction my reading takes. I do read other things. I'm currently reading The Overstory by Richard Powers, which I absolutely love, and so I do like a lot of current fiction too, but this is my all-time favorite genres. So I hope that this was interesting, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.